So here we have Thomas Massie, a Republican from Kentucky, standing up in Congress and asking a question that millions of Americans have been screaming for years. Where are the arrests in the Epstein case?
The gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Massie, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Congress created the Department of Justice. Congress funds the Department of Justice, and Congress is responsible for the oversight of the Department of Justice. When will we see justice? I'll tell you what I've not seen. I've not seen any arrests from the revelations in the Epstein files, over 3 million documents describing horrible things, describing unspeakable things, so much of it redacted. Over 24 people have resigned, CEOs, members of government worldwide, but I haven't seen any arrests or investigations here in the United States from this Department of Justice. Prince Andrew, Duke of York, who has since been stripped of his royal titles due to his affiliation with Jeffrey Epstein, has been arrested. Peter Mandelson, who previously served as UK's ambassador to the United States, resigned in disgrace from United Kingdom's House of Lords and the Labour Party, and he's been arrested. Former Prime Minister of Norway, Torbjørn Jagland, has been charged. But we don't see any charges, arrests, or investigations in the United States. What do we see? We see our FBI director celebrating in the locker room at the Olympics overseas. It's fine to be proud of this country, but we should be proud of this country because we have a system of justice that works, and yet we do not. Who are the men that should be investigated? I'll name them right here. Leon Black. You don't even have to see past the redactions to see that this man needs to be investigated. Jess Staley, accused of terrible things. It's right there in the files. Why is he not being investigated? And Leslie Wexner, why did the FBI list him as a co-conspirator in their own documents in a child sex trafficking case, and then tell him, according to him, that they had no questions for him? Why is that? Well, the Epstein Files Transparency Act requires the DOJ and the FBI to disclose to us their internal memos and emails about how they made those decisions, whether to prosecute or not prosecute. Yet they have not delivered those memos. And we still don't have the memos and documents and emails from 2008 to explain why Jeffrey Epstein was given such a light sentence in what would have been an open and shut case of child sex trafficking, which allowed him to go back and recommit these terrible crimes, create hundreds of more victims, and ensnare so many other people in his conspiracy. Where are those documents that describe those decisions? We need justice. We want the Department of Justice to get to work, and that's what they need to do now. Madam Speaker, I rise today to let the American people know that this government is under siege. All 3 branches of this government is under siege by lobbyists and lawyers from a German company named Bayer. They spent over $9 million lobbying the executive branch and the legislative branch so that they don't have to be liable for any damages that their herbicide causes, otherwise known as Roundup. And they're having some success. Now, they haven't had any success yet in this chamber to get that immunity. They've had some success in the state legislatures, which are also under siege, to get this immunity from liability. Look, the Constitution guarantees people a trial if they've been harmed. Why are we contemplating going against the Constitution? The Attorney General has opined favorably for this German company in front of the Supreme Court about getting rid of any liability that they should have for any damages. And the most recent thing that we've seen, the executive branch. By the way, the president's chief of staff and the president's attorney general work for one of the biggest lobbying firms that's received hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars from Bayer. And maybe that's why we've seen an executive order that says that the production of this chemical from this German company is a national defense priority. And we know why they're doing that. It's to keep them from having any liability. Everybody in this country deserves their day in court. This is wrong. We shouldn't succumb to the lobbyists, not in the executive branch, not in the judicial branch, and certainly not here in Congress and not in the state legislatures. But there's a lot of money at play. And I implore my colleagues to resist it and do not give them immunity. And I yield back.
The chair recognizes the woman from Minnesota, Ms. Morrison, for 5 minutes.
Now let me say this clearly. When it comes to accountability for the crimes of Jeffrey Epstein and the network around him, this should not be a partisan issue. This is about child sex trafficking. This is about abuse. This is about powerful men who thought they were untouchable. And Massie is right about one thing. Congress created the United States Department of Justice. Congress funds it. Congress oversees it. So where is the justice? He points out that we've seen revelations, millions of documents, horrific allegations, names of wealthy and influential individuals. He notes that overseas, there have been consequences, referencing figures like Prince Andrew losing royal titles and other international political figures facing charges or resignations. And here in the United States, silence. Now let's pause here, because this is where it gets complicated. Massie goes further. He names specific businessmen, Leon Black, Jess Staley, Leslie Wexner, and demands investigations. He references redactions in files. He questions decisions made years ago, especially that 2008 sweetheart plea deal that allowed Epstein to serve a light sentence instead of facing full federal prosecution. And let's be honest, that plea deal was outrageous. It was a betrayal of victims. It happened under federal prosecutors in Florida. It set the stage for more abuse, more victims, more suffering. That is a stain on our justice system. But here's what I need to say as someone on the left. We cannot allow the demand for accountability to turn into political theater. We cannot pretend that outrage alone equals evidence. Naming names on the House floor is dramatic, and yes, it grabs headlines, but prosecutions require proof. They require evidence that can stand up in court. The DOJ cannot and should not arrest people because it polls well. At the same time, transparency absolutely matters. Massie mentions the so-called Epstein Files Transparency Act and internal DOJ memos. If Congress legally requires disclosure of internal communications about prosecutorial decisions, then yes, those documents should be produced. Sunlight is not the enemy of justice. Secrecy is. But what worries me is something deeper. The Epstein case has become a kind of Rorschach test for America's distrust in institutions. For some on the right, it's proof of a deep state protecting elites. For some on the left, it's proof of billionaire impunity and systemic corruption. And honestly, there's truth in the idea that wealth and power distort justice in this country. The wealthy do get better lawyers. The powerful do get access. The connected do get doors opened. That's not conspiracy. That's structural inequality. But here, where Massie's speech takes a sharp turn, he pivots from Epstein and DOJ oversight to attacking Bayer. Yes, the German pharmaceutical and chemical giant, over lobbying efforts tied to Roundup liability. He claims that lobbyists are laying siege to all three branches of government. He alleges that executives connected to the current administration previously worked at firms representing Bayer. He argues that an executive order designating chemical production as a national defense priority is somehow a backdoor immunity shield. Let's unpack this carefully. Bayer acquired Monsanto and inherited the legal firestorm over Roundup. Thousands of lawsuits claim the herbicide causes cancer. There have been jury verdicts. There have been settlements. There has been real legal exposure. Lobbying absolutely happens. Corporations absolutely try to limit liability. That's how corporate power works in Washington. But the Constitution argument Massie raises, That immunity violates the right to trial, deserves scrutiny. Congress has, in certain contexts, provided liability shields before. Think about vaccine manufacturers. Think about gun manufacturers. Whether you agree with those shields or not, they are not unprecedented. The question is this particular immunity justified? And here, where I'm going to be blunt. If any corporation, foreign or domestic, harms Americans, those Americans deserve their day in court. Period. That is not anti-business. That is pro-accountability. But we also have to be careful not to mix narratives in ways that muddy the waters. Epstein accountability and herbicide liability are two separate issues. By fusing them into one sweeping indictment of government corruption, Massie creates a powerful rhetorical moment, but he also blurs lines that matter. And I want to talk about something bigger. The reason the Epstein story still grips people isn't just the crimes. It's the fear that elite networks protect themselves. It's the fear that prosecutors look the other way when billionaires are involved. It's the fear that justice is harsher for the powerless and softer for the connected. That fear did not come from nowhere. We live in a country where Wall Street executives crashed the global economy and almost none went to prison. We live in a country where corporate settlements are often written as the cost of doing business. We live in a country where lobbying is legal and massively influential. So when Massie says the government is under siege by lobbyists, he's tapping into something real: public frustration with corporate capture. But here's the tension. Massie himself is part of a party that routinely votes to deregulate corporations, weaken regulatory agencies, and slash funding for oversight bodies. You cannot rail against corporate influence on Tuesday and vote to empower it on Wednesday. Accountability must be consistent. If we want justice in the Epstein case, that means fully funding investigators. It means protecting whistleblowers. It means ensuring the DOJ has the resources and independence to pursue cases without political interference from either party. If we want accountability for corporate misconduct, that means strengthening consumer protection laws. It means resisting backroom liability shields. It means campaign finance reform so that $9 million in lobbying doesn't buy silence. You cannot selectively hate corruption. And here's what I think is the most important part of all this. Victims. The Epstein survivors are not political props. They are not hashtags. They are not floor speeches. They deserve transparency. They deserve answers. They deserve to know why decisions were made. They deserve to see that the system is capable of correcting itself. If there are crimes that can be prosecuted, prosecute them. If there are documents that must be released, release them. If there were failures in 2008, and there clearly were, own them. But do it through evidence, through due process, through the rule of law. Because once we abandon that, once we start demanding arrests as performance rather than as legal outcomes, we become the very thing we claim to oppose. Now let me end with this. This moment, this speech, is a mirror. It reflects a country that doesn't trust its institutions. It reflects anger at elite immunity. It reflects a belief that something rotten sits at the top. And the only way to fix that isn't partisan grandstanding. It's radical transparency. It's campaign finance reform. It's strengthening oversight instead of gutting it. It's holding billionaires accountable regardless of party affiliation. It's ensuring the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the DOJ operate independently, not as political footballs. Justice is not a slogan, it's a process. It's evidence, it's courage, and it's consistency. If we truly want to live in a country where no one is above the law, not princes, not CEOs, not politicians, not donors, then we have to demand that standard across the board. Not just when it benefits our side. If you believe in accountability for the powerful, if you believe victims deserve more than speeches, if you believe democracy survives only when justice is equal, then stay engaged. Drop your thoughts in the comments, share this video, and most importantly, keep demanding transparency from everyone.